folks, we finally have a week one depth chart to look at. An official release from Iowa was released Monday. We're going to react to it here in the next few minutes. But first, before we get to the content, as we get ready for week one, Iowa's opponent, UAlbany, coming to town to play Iowa in Kinnick Stadium. We want to give a big thank you to our sponsors, Iowa Floor Covering, Carpet, Tile, and more. You can visit them in Bondurant or visit them online, iowafloorcovering.com. Their phone number is 515-379-7000. Under the Kitchen, Randy Engel, his authentic Hawkeye artwork. He'll be at Fry Fest. Visit the stand. Check out his Facebook page, search Under the Kitchen, or visit his website, underthekitchen.square.site. But again, Randy and his authentic signed and unsigned prints will have a stand there at Fry Fest later this week. So we are reacting to the official week one depth chart that was put out by the University of Iowa on Monday. Of course, I released my depth chart predictions earlier in the week, actually over the weekend. If you missed that, you can compare. We're going to do a little comparing here over the next few minutes, but my main purpose of doing this is to run through that official depth chart and give you my thoughts. So we'll start at the top. On the offensive side of the ball, we talked about the X spot, and I know some people were really surprised that I had Sam Phillips listed as one of the two X's on the depth chart, and I did not think, I'll be honest, I did not think that Iowa would place him first above Reese Vanderzee, but that's exactly what they did. But people were surprised that I had him listed at all because they thought, hey, X has to be a big guy. We're going to have Reese Vanderzee and 6'5" receiver Dayton Howard. Not the case, and Tim Lester has given indications of this for quite some time, that he's not terribly concerned with a guy who's 6'4", 6'5". Yeah, you prefer that, but he wants speed, he wants route running ability, he wants a complete receiver, a guy who can take the top off the defense. Sam Phillips listed above Reese Vanderzee, and yes, there is literally a 9-inch difference between those two guys. I'm excited to see this. Both guys will play, don't get me wrong, but I love the fact that Sam Phillips is listed first. You slide down the depth chart to the other receiver positions. No surprises there. I think I had Caden Weegan flip-flopped. I had him behind Gill. I had Parker behind Anderson, but Gill and Anderson are the two other starters. Bowie and Howard, the two receivers that we expect to be in the rotation, not listed, but those were in line with my predictions that I released over the weekend. Tight end was chalk based on what I said over the weekend as well. Ostringa, Ortworth, and they did list Large, which was my prediction. They have a lot of respect for Hayden Large. He will play. We won't see a ton of 13 personnel, but if there are any injuries, you're going to see Large accepting a bigger role, not as a fullback, but as a tight end in this new look Iowa offense. How about left tackle? No decision made here officially. I had Trevor Lauk as the starter. He is the co-starter according to the official depth chart with Jack Doetzler. And if you look at the other right tackle spot, you got Jennings Dunker, but then either Doetzler or Lauk backing up Dunker. So do the math there. Whoever ends up being the starting left tackle would then not be the backup. It'd be the backup to left tackle, which would also be the backup to right tackle. And I think you could maybe say the same thing about center. I would not be surprised if Michael Myslinski, who is listed as the backup to Logan Jones, ends up being the backup right guard. No disrespect to Lucas Allgaier. It's cool that he's listed here. The legacy lineman, who is a true freshman, listed as the backup right guard to Cade Pieper, but don't be surprised if Pieper were to go down, if you see them slide Myslinski or maybe even a Cale Winter over to right guard. Winter not listed on the depth chart here. Left guard, you got Leighton Jones backing up Bo Stevens. Bryce George is the third guy listed at left tackle, but don't be surprised if he could potentially work his way into left guard consideration. He's been working inside and outside, but I think the biggest thing there is don't be surprised if Myslinski assumes the backup position at a couple different spots. They're not going to list him as the backup center and as the backup right guard. Quarterback, no surprises. Mark Gronowski, Hank Brown, we called that one. I'm not the only one, obviously. Hank Brown has solidified himself as the most consistent option, second to Mark Gronowski. Running back was a surprise, though. That was by the biggest takeaway, besides Sam Phillips listed as the number one X receiver. The biggest surprise on this depth chart on offense was the fact that you have a co-starter with Kamari Moulton, not named Jazz Patterson, and not named Nathan McNeil. It's Terrell Washington Jr., who had been kind of quiet. We hadn't heard a lot about him during fall camp, but he is listed as the co-starter along with Kamari Moulton. Backup is Jazz Patterson and Xavier Williams. A bit of a surprise there. So you have four guys listed, none of which are named Nathan McNeil. And you may say, well, Corey, true freshmen don't get listed on week one depth charts. Well, Lucas Allgaier is listed on the week 1 depth chart, backing up Cade Pieper. So that's interesting. I do think Nathan McNeil is going to play, right? I think he's going to play running back as a position that typically struggles to stay healthy all year long. But that is your offensive depth chart. We move to the defense and special teams. Max Llewellyn at left end, backed up by Brian Allen. I think I had Brian Allen backing up the other side of that line at Ethan Herkin's spot as his backup. But you've got Brian Allen listed there. I just had Allen and Kenneth Merriweather flip-flopped. Merriweather listed as the backup at right end. And then on the interior of that line, Aaron Graves, Will Hubert listed. That is not a surprise necessarily, although I had, again, I think I had Jonah Pace behind Aaron Graves. Bryce Hawthorne is listed as the starter, and I've been told here for some time that he was expected to be a starter. I just didn't think Iowa would list him as such, given the experience acumen that Jeremiah Pittman brings. But Hawthorne is the more explosive option, without question, with the highest upside. So kudos to Iowa for actually putting out there Bryce Hawthorne as the starter. And maybe Pittman's still dealing with some lingering injury issues, but it's Hawthorne and Pace on the depth chart. Hawthorne as the starter. Cash, you've got Zach Lutmer, Cohen Entringer, and then at strong safety, you got Cohen Entringer, Zach Lutmer. If you remember earlier in August when I recorded a show with Coach Patterson, we talked about Lutmer as the starting cash, and then everybody was telling me, hey, you're wrong. It's going to be Entringer. He's the starting cash. And throughout all this, I kept hearing, no, Lutmer is the guy. So it's going to be interesting to see how Iowa uses these two. I think you could see Entringer and Lutmer split time at cash. And this is a position that I think for quite some time people have been like, no, you're wrong. It's not going to be Lutmer. It's going to be Entringer. And finally, I was like, okay, maybe it is Entringer. I listed him as the starting cash during the recent depth chart release. But sure enough, it's Lutmer as the starting cash guy. Don't be surprised if both those guys work in at cash. They're both viable options at strong safety and at cash. And notice Cale Kolarek, as I predicted, is listed as the backup at free safety. Of course, you have Xavier Wampa and then Cohen. If something happened to Wampa, then you would see Entringer move over to free safety. Lutmer would then be the strong safety, and Kolarek may slide down to cash because he has worked in some at cash during the offseason, during camp. But the top guys, without question, at cash and at the safety spots are Wampa, Entringer, Lutmer, and Kolarek. 4 guys to fill 3 spots. So there's a depth issue there. I do think that. But the good news is I think Kolarek gives them a viable spot, a backup who's not actively a starter as of right now. Cornerback is a different story in that they have their solidified starters and they have their solidified backups, but the level of production is still a question mark. You got TJ Hall as a starting guy at left corner, Deshaun Lee opposite of him, and then Jalen Watson, I think, is the backup at both spots, although he's listed as the co-backup at right corner with Rashad Godfrey and the co-backup at left corner with Shaheed Barrows. So a little surprised Godfrey made it onto the 2 deeps, but Barrows was definitely going to be on the 2 deeps. He's had his ups and downs so far after transferring in from South Dakota. And I didn't mean to miss linebacker. You have the Leo spot, Jackson Rexroth, Landon Van Keckerick's there. Not really surprised on that one. Jaden Harrell. I had Nolan DeLong as the backup middle linebacker. It's Jaden Montgomery, but I think Seth would be comfortable with either one of those guys. He's recently complimented. I released a video last night with Seth Wallace from Iowa Media Day where he was really complimenting Jaden Montgomery's knowledge of the defense. Carson Shire listed as a starter. Jackson Rexroth would be the backup there. So Van Keckerick's might fill in at Leo if something happened to Shire and Rexroth had to slide over. And so I think they're a little bit better at depth there than they are at safety, just because Seth Wallace has confidence in guys like DeLong and Montgomery who do have some age, some maturity on them, maybe that they don't have at some of the safety spots. They're very thin after the top 4 at safety and cash. Specialists, no holder, no snapper, no kick or punt returns. And this is just how Iowa does it sometimes. Sometimes they list them, sometimes they don't. Drew Stevens, obviously your starting kicker. They do not list Caden Boer, but he is the backup to Stevens. Reese Dakin is the starting punter. Ty Nissen would be his backup. And again, as I talked about on my recent depth chart prediction video, it's going to be Caden Weegan returning kicks and punts, and likely KJ Parker alongside him at both positions. I think more likely he's the backup at punt returner, but I also think he'll be alongside Weegan returning kicks. If not, it's probably going to be Brevin Dahl, Braden Jackson, someone like that. Holding, I think it's Ty Nissen without question. Dakin is his backup. Snaps, I still am going to say there's going to be a rotation between Wuerl and Speltz, but maybe one of those guys will emerge. Wuerl's been better on field goal snaps. Speltz has been better on punt snaps. So that is your week 1 depth chart, folks. I think we ran through literally everyone there and pretty close to my predictions. You can compare, go back and compare. I'll throw it up here in the corner. If you missed that video from over the weekend, I think the biggest difference there just being a couple of little flip-flops, specifically at receiver with Sam Phillips. Reese Vanderzee, running back, was a bit of a surprise. I had McNeil on my depth chart. Entringer, Lutmer, been going back and forth about who's actually going to be the starting cash, who's actually going to be starting strong safety. The good news there is I think Phil Parker has confidence with both guys playing either position, but their health is of utmost importance. Folks, later on today, our official season preview show with none other than Coach Don Patterson. Keep it locked right here. And then again, after the game against Albany this Saturday, live post-game coverage with you, me, and Coach Patterson right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Hit that like button. Support our sponsors. We will talk to you soon as we approach the kickoff of the 2025 Iowa football season.